Elizabeth Evans, and I'm a homeschooling mom of 4 young kids. I'm figuring this out as I go, but I'm here to talk to Bonnie, who has been writing and speaking on the subject for over a decade and has been homeschooling for 3 decades.
My name's Bonnie Landry. I've got 7 kids. They're ages 13 to 33. I've been homeschooling for 29 years. I'm a wife, a mom, a grandma. I'm a speaker and a writer, and I'm an advocate of joy. So we're here to provide this podcast so that homeschooling can look like you imagined it to be. Record on this computer. There we go. Okay, we're recording.
All right.
So, good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Elizabeth, this is Kelly Briggs, and we're interviewing Kelly today because when I first came across her on Instagram, I thought, oh, this is such a woman after my own heart, because all of what she has to say is about simplicity. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But so Kelly is from Nova Scotia, Halifax, Nova Scotia, which is on the complete opposite end of the country from me, but also near the water. And so I'm assuming, Kelly, that the smell of salt air is just your normal.
Yes.
Yeah. When my kids come home from being away at school or whatever, they always say, oh, the air smells so good. Yeah. For some people, it probably smells yucky, but for us, the smell of seaweed is pretty good. So, and Elizabeth is from Michigan, so I'm not sure how much of you listen to our podcast, but Elizabeth is fairly close to you. So, anyways, what I got really jazzed about was I saw something of myself in you when I started reading your material, and I thought, oh, this is so good. This is so good for moms to know this, and I'm so glad that you support moms in the way that you do. And so we have quite a few questions that we've come up with. A lot of them based on questions that have been reformed from questions we've received from moms and for me over the years, many questions I've received from moms. And so we'll just sort of launch into those questions and sort of see where they take us, right? So, and feel free to take a question where you want it to go, because you're hearing these questions all the time, I'm sure, from the moms that are in contact with you.
Yes.
All right, Elizabeth, you want to?
Yeah.
Start? Okay, great.
All right. Well, first, can you just go ahead and tell us about yourself and your family?
Sure. So I'm a past elementary teacher. Everyone always likes to know that. But I've been home for 7.5 years now. And I have 3 boys, aged almost 10, 7, and 4. I got it right. And our surprise girl, because we expected a boy, she's 1.5.
So you're all exactly the same.
Yeah. I was just thinking, yep, I've got 3 boys and then my little girl.
I heard that on one of the podcasts, I think. Yeah, and it was a surprise. We were like, oh, it's a girl. So our household is very busy, very busy and lively and energetic, of course, because 3 boys. My husband and I have been married for 11 years, and I would say our family is pretty simple. That's of course everything that I talk about, but we love, my boys love playing in the dirt. They love playing outside. They love being creative and hands-on with our own devices. So that's a bit about our family lifestyle. We're kind of, my husband and I are also home buddies. We go out, we have friends and stuff. I mean, it's different right now, of course, with the pandemic. But our lifestyle is pretty simple. We love just going out in our backyard and hiking and sending the kids out in the dirt. So that's a bit about us, I guess.
Dirt is great. We actually, we just did my husband removed some stumps from our backyard, and our grandsons happened to be over. And there was this giant, sort of probably 8 foot wide by 4 foot deep hole from where the stumps came out. Well, they played in that hole all afternoon. I said, I know you want to fill this hole in, but I think you need to just dig a hole somewhere on the property. Our boys just spent a lot of time in the dirt and the trees, right?
Yeah. I have a special place in our yard where the boys are allowed to just dig, where I don't care, do whatever you want. You could build, dig big holes or, make a mess. So
that's the same as our backyard too, but we often have to be please don't dig up the garden. Go dig in the woods. There's your digging hole over there.
Right.
Exactly. Our family structure, Kelly, is we had 3 girls first. And then, of course, once I had my first boy, it was like, what? You know, it's the same thing. I thought I was going to be a girl family. And then we had 3 boys in a row. And the sort of vibe of our family completely changed because, you know, by the time the boys were all around, the girls were all teenagers and young adults. And it was a completely different thing. And I thought girls were noisy, you know, until I had boys. And then it was like,
Often like,
oh, wow. Big adjustment.
Indoor voices, please. I'm standing right here.
Yeah. They're so excited about life. Oh, it's so good. So the question was really kind of burning on my mind, because this happened for me for sure, was there some sort of event or turning point? Were you just raised with parents who were, you know, lived simple lives? Or was there a turning point in your life where you thought, oh my gosh, I'm drowning and something needs to give? So what did that look like for you?
So I guess a little backstory, because you mentioned about parents. Looking back, like my father's an artist, and he was always like around at home, and we weren't like fancy or anything. So I guess we were pretty simple, and we did a lot of outside stuff. And yeah, so I guess I did live in a lifestyle of that growing up. But for myself personally, becoming like a parent, a whole new world. And I think I hit my 3rd kid. Actually, Bonnie, I remember one of your podcasts saying it was about the same time for you. Like I hit my 3rd kid, the 3rd boy in a row. And I remember distinctly standing in the kitchen with like a scrap piece of paper with this giant to-do list. And I just had like a moment of overwhelm and like, where do I start? What do I do? How do I do this? And when I had 2 kids, I was able to keep up with the house. And my husband and I both like being tidy. We both have that similarity. We like tidy and orderness. And his family and his parents grew up with his grandmother, and she was very tidy. So it was just something he was used to. But, you know, I kept up with everything with 2 kids. But then the 3rd kid came, and I was just crushed. I was just feeling really like, I can't keep up with this anymore. Like I can't keep up with everything at all times. And that's something that I talk about a lot. So yeah, I was literally standing with a scrap piece of paper and just like having a moment of surrender of like, I can't do this anymore. Like something has to give. And then that was like my defining moment, just standing in the kitchen being like, yeah, that was definitely like a turning point. And from there, that's when things started to change, because I recognized that I just couldn't keep up anymore, you know? So yeah, that was my defining moment.
And you realize you're like, almost like you've been driving yourself nuts, right?
Yes.
We had, there's a beauty in order. And I think that was the big thing for me, is when I started having less and having more order and appreciating that. What I really appreciated was the beauty of it, right? There's this, I don't know if I've shared this story before in the podcast, but one time I had my family over for dinner, and there was, you know, there's a lot of us, right? So there's, you know, I don't know, 18 people or 20 people in my house. And my sister-in-law walks in. I don't think she'll be listening. She walks in and she goes, "It's always so peaceful at your house. It must be all the wood, right?" And like, because there's, you know, we have a lot of wood in our house. And it was such a funny thing, because to me, it's all the not stuff, right? Yeah. And there's something about that that's just very attractive to people, but they can't put their finger on it, right? What's going on here, sort of thing. So, okay, well, that's good. I'm glad to know that there was like, it's like a conversion story. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so then what do you do personally to simplify your family life?
So there's so many different things that I could talk about. But the first thing that I want to share, because for the listeners too, is that I didn't have it figured out, and I still don't have it all figured out, quote unquote. It was just that moment of something needs to change. Okay, I need to start making small incremental changes. And I have to remind myself of that often too, because often I know for myself, I'll look at the bigger picture and be like, I want to be at stage 10, but we're still at stage 0. Let's go from 0 to the next thing, to the next thing. So during that moment of myself stressing out standing in the kitchen, I think the very first thing that I did was actually tackle more of like the home stuff. So I went on a decluttering rampage. I was like, I need to get stuff out. I had like letters from junior high, the letters that you write to your girlfriends. I'm like, why do I have these? I don't want these. I don't want to pass these on. So that was something that I felt called to do first, was just like simplify the home and getting rid of stuff. So that is something that I do personally and still do, is kind of like maintenance decluttering, I call it.
Sure.
It's so key because we have 4 kids, and you do too, Elizabeth. So staying on top of like periodically, not staying on top of surface stuff, because there's always surface stuff with kids, right? Like there's no way it could be perfectly Instagram, quote unquote, perfect, because we live here, right? So, so what I do personally is definitely like the decluttering, the maintenance decluttering. And I recently put a donation box by our front door so it would stop piling up in our basement. Simple tweaks, right? So small, simple tweaks over time. And that's been really good for us. And just learning how to simple plan over time. When I was standing in the kitchen with my to-do list, I was not a planner at that point. I was like a sticky notes all over the walls, and I had a sewing business at the time, and I remember like sticky notes on my computer and my sewing machine and on the table, and I'm like, oh no, my toddler just ate my note. Like, where did it go?
Sticky notes and children, this is not really a good mix, right?
It wasn't a very good strategy. So I was like a list taker, and I would write things, but I wasn't very like organized or simple in that manner. So learning, like I learned about bullet journaling because I had a really good friend who kind of suggested it to me. She's like, Kelly, I think you'll like this. And the first time she suggested it, I was like, oh no, I'm good. But then when I had that moment of surrender, I was like, maybe I'll look into it. And that really kind of changed things for me. And I started learning just simple skills. Nothing like, if you Google search bullet journaling, a lot of people are like, I do very simple stuff like paper and pen and just simple, I don't doodle or anything like that. I just get my thoughts on paper. And that kind of really helped me along the way, just learning like basic planning skills for, homeschooling, meal planning, and all flexible too. Like I love planning, but I'm also, flexible in knowing that there's 6 of us in the home, plus my dad lives with us now, and things can change on a dime. So, so learning planning skills over time has been really helpful in simplifying our home. I find like for myself, if I don't write things down, that we just don't do it. I don't know, maybe it's my husband and I, because we're like low key people. And if we don't write things down or talk about like intentional things we want to do as a family, we'll just be like, let's just sit here and drink tea all day, or like, you know what I mean? And then life just kind of happens around us because our kids are so lively. They will just do stuff all day and be happy, and then the house will be an explosion. That's another issue. But yeah, so like planning and writing things down on paper, and also talking to my husband and like writing things down together has really helped simplify our home. I know that might not be a strategy for everybody, but there is something about writing things down, and like it just like sticks, you know what I mean?
Well, and I think that what happens when you write, for me anyway, what happens when I write things down, my day always starts and ends with a list, right? And I can let it go, right? So I'm not sort of thinking, is there something's going, so what am I trying to remember, So if I write things down in the morning that are on my head and my brain, and then I write things down in the evening, then I can just let it go, right? I'm not thinking about, okay, it's written down, and I can address that tomorrow when I go to sort of, check things off or whatever. And, there's something really, freeing, I guess, about writing it down, right?
Well, and not only that.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, if you make a list, to get things done, then you feel more accomplished, because at the end of the day, you can look and see, oh, I checked off 3 out of 5 things. I actually did have a productive day.
I did. I know. Always hug your kids on your list too.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. I think like in the process of learning how to simple plan that. In the beginning, of course, I was still like making these massive to-do lists, but like over time, writing things down, the practice of writing things down in a proper book to not just sticky notes, kind of helped me to see like I'm being totally unrealistic with my expectations of myself and of the kids. And it just kind of like, it really just, it's almost a tool for a reevaluation or evaluation, or you know, just to see it and be like, I'm not crossing off all these things, and I feel stressed out because I'm not crossing off all these things, or this is unreasonable. So that was kind of like a long process for me to kind of just over time see. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to mention a resource, because I think it would play well into this. Our last is becoming a theme. Our last couple of interviews, we've talked, or well, I think one was just questions we were answering, but we've talked a lot. It's just come up naturally about sort of assessment and evaluation and taking the time to do that, right? And how that in and of itself really changes the nature of our life, whether it's you know, something we're doing ourselves individually or with our spouse or our family. And the resource that I'd like to mention is called, do you know who Tish Oxenreider is, The Art of Simple?
Yes, I haven't read it, but I've heard of it.
Okay, so she has a website called The Art of Simple. I haven't read the book either, but I've spent some time on the website for sure. And she has a resource on her website for developing your family purpose statement, right? And I mean, this may seem unrelated, but I really don't think it is, because when you spend time developing a family purpose statement, it really helps you to define what it is that matters to me. And therefore, on the day-to-day, that really becomes a tool for you to say, okay, you know what? These things on my to-do list actually don't matter very much to me, right? Mm-hmm. You know, whether we have a beautifully landscaped yard, or whether we, you know, repaint the house, or whatever, you know, whatever it is. But so she really lays it out really clearly how long this will take. This is something to do with your spouse. This is the kind of time you need to put in. This is what your goal is. And she helps you come up with both an actual statement, this is our family purpose statement, but then kind of defining that. What does that actually mean, right, in the different areas of my life? I would really recommend that. So if you go on the website, theartofsimple.net, I believe it is, I'll find it for the show notes, and just type in the search bar, family purpose statement, that will come up, because that's a really useful tool. And I'll just share a very quick story. Years ago, long before I came across this, that was something I did because I like to write, and writing is therapeutic for me. I had come up with our own family statement, right? And I ended up giving some talks on it to homeschool groups and whatnot back in the day. And so after my daughter was born, she's 14 now, but after she was born, I got very, very, very sick. And I was sick for weeks and weeks and weeks. And I ended up, you know, becoming very close to dying. They don't know why I survived. I had a bowel obstruction, and I ended up having an emergency bowel resection, but it became obstructed over time. And anyway, the upshot of it was that I said to Albert, you know, I'm either going to be hospitalized for a long time, or I'm going to die, and we need to talk about this, right? And he was like, no, it's fine. That's not gonna happen. And I said, no, it is gonna happen. I'm really serious. I just had a sense of, I knew how sick I was. And, but that purpose statement that I hadn't referred to in a long time was in my brain. It was really solidified in my brain. And I was able to say to him, what's important to me right now is that we revisit why we've made all the decisions we've made to this point, right? And I need you to just listen. You're gonna make if I die, you're gonna make whatever decisions you make. However, I want it to be fresh in your mind why we've made all the decisions we've made up till now. And so that you're equipped to make decisions for the future, right? And that singular moment, you know, which was 20 years later, you know, 15 years later, from making that statement, changed everything, because I was able to lucidly say, you know, let's look at this. Right. And so, you know, from a daily thing to a life-changing thing. Right. And so anyway, just a thought that might be useful to listeners.
That was actually my next point on how simplified our family life, our home life is, like looking at our values and priorities, and to like think about what are the things that we value. Is it getting outside? Is it keeping up with all the laundry? Is it, what is it? What are those things? So that was something, again, that like we just explored over time.
Yeah.
And that my husband and I kind of like talked about here and there.
And did you define that? Was that something you clearly defined? Because you like to write as well, right? So
yeah, I have looked at the Art is Simple because I think you blogged about it, Bonnie, and I was looking at it. I think I need to go through it in more detail. We have like a basic, you know, values and priorities, what we prioritize as a family. Our homeschool one is the encourage one another and build each other up. And I have that up on our wall because I think that's such a, for us, like that is like our focus, right? Like, what are we doing here, right? We need to encourage one another and love each other and, you know, and go forth kind of thing. So that's like our simple one. But I think I'm definitely encouraged to go through even deeper in that. And I've been thinking about that recently too, like, you know, not to be morbid, but, you know, what if I died or my husband died, and like, what are our family's values and priorities going forward? So that, that was definitely like a part of realizing and looking to make a more intentional, simple life for our family, was really diving in deep on those important things, because it's so easy, as you both know, that the days can just go by so quickly and life can happen to you, right? Like without really thinking about it, you know, like the kids need diapers changed and all those kinds of things in your day, or, you know, the boys take over the house with marble tracks like this morning. But like, yeah, it can just take over if you're not really thinking about, well, what's important. Okay, guys, it's time to get out for a walk because that's an important thing for us as a family, or to pray together, or whatever those values and priorities are for your family. So yeah, that was my next point too. So
yeah, no, that's great. And we have to avoid becoming victims of our own lives, right? And that's something that, you know, I think people are way more aware of now than you know, even 10, 15 years ago, right? So was it my question next?
Yeah.
Elizabeth, okay. So this is a question that just all the time happens, all the time with homeschool moms. How do I do it all, right? How do I do it all? And so I was hoping you could speak to that.
So I kind of touched on it a bit, but basically just like, the acceptance of that I can't do it all. I can't keep up with all things at all times. And that that's gonna, for me, it leads to burnout. Like if I'm trying to get everything done, if I'm trying to make my massive to-do list and be like this productivity robot, like that is going to burn me out. Like we need time for rest, and we need time for, you know, reading or whatever it is that just fills us up. And that, again, like coming back to having my third kid and that huge realization, like I can't keep up with this anymore, and that I shouldn't, because I can't give back to my family if I'm just constantly burnt out. So that's what was happening with me. And that is a common question that I definitely hear a lot, or moms sharing, like, how do I keep up with everything? Or how do I, there was a question recently about how do I keep up with all the chores while homeschooling and having more time with my daughter, right? So it's just like, that's where it comes down to the values and priorities, to really like dive deep, to be like, what is it that matters most for my family? And is it having a tidy house 24/7, or is it having a balance? Is it like focusing more on building habits with the kids as they get older to help that home to be more simple and tidier and that kind of thing? And that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to build those habits. But that is a value of our family, is to like help create these habits of, and you know, chores and tidiness, and not to like obsess over perfection, because that's also going to lead to burnout, I found. So to be realistic with our expectations and realize that it's impossible really to stay up with everything at all times. It's just a matter of prioritizing and coming back to that over and over and over. It's not like a one and done kind of process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question for you that's related to this, that one of the things that I found over time is I during sort of crisis times, and I'm using the word crisis because of course the birth of a baby isn't a crisis, but it's a time of you know, where you have to kind of fold it on ourselves in a sense, right? And so I made the area that I kept tidy very, very tiny. And so I just had to make a mental decision that I wasn't going to care about the other areas of my life right now, that I only was going to care about this. And as you know, I gained traction in terms of energy and whatnot, then I could expand my area little by little. But it was, you know, is that something that you do? Because that was a huge help for me.
So for having a baby or you know,
if somebody's sick or whatever, you just make a decision not to care about certain areas.
Yeah, I definitely use that as a strategy. I hurt my back or had some muscle issues like a few weeks ago, and that was the kind of thing I like to keep my bedroom tidy, and you know what, we're going to let the laundry go to plan B instead of plan A for our laundry. And same with like dishes and things around the house. And of course it's hard, but it's really good to just kind of sit and remind yourself, you know, I just had a baby, or I just hurt my back, or I have a child who's being tested for COVID, because we had 2 in September. They didn't end up being positive, but we had to, you know, put them in their own bedroom, and my husband was with them and I was on my own with the 3 kids. And I'm like, okay, let's take those regular expectations and the regular amount of household stuff getting done down to here.
Yeah.
To remind myself of that too, because, you know, otherwise it starts creeping back up again, and then the overwhelm starts creeping up, and it's like, oh no, right, I can't do that to myself because I've got a child sick with my husband, and it's got to come down. So yeah, it's definitely
we can eat off paper plates, right?
Yeah.
we have permission to do that.
Yeah, we can live out of laundry baskets, and we can play in the dirt, and yeah.
Okay, so I think the next question is probably the one our listeners are going to want to hear the most, I think.
Yeah, well, could you tell us about what you do and how your work can support homeschoolers?
So I've been in social media for quite a long time, but I think it's been the past few years that I've really like focused in on I'll focus on the things that kind of like my own journey. So I've been sharing more about my own journey and what works for us and myself as a person. And of course that is like simple living, simple home life, and like decluttering and all the things. So I guess really it's been the past year that I've really had this clarity of like, encouragement to go out more and to encourage moms even more in this area, because I just keep hearing from so many moms like myself who are feeling overwhelmed. So a lot of what I do is just create a lot of content, free stuff, on my blog, mail list and that kind of thing, which has been ongoing, but just like in a deeper way to encourage like what, to all of us as moms to think about what matters most, what are our values, and a lot of practical stuff too. So a lot of what I share to moms are, tips to make things simpler around the home. And hey, it might not work for you, but some of it might, because I'm more so sharing my journey. And I think that's so important, to be real and to share my journey with other moms and encourage them in their life as well. I recently actually launched a course for the first time. I never really had plans to. It just kind of, when something comes, and then I gave a lot of space to discern it and stuff. But it's basically simplifying home life, and that's been wonderful. And I plan to carry that forward.
How many times have you run that?
This is in its first run right now, and I'll probably be launching it again next year. And but it's a lot of what I share on social media. It's just kind of like in a course format. But yeah, so that's my focus for my focus is on busy moms or just moms at home. So it's not specific to homeschooling, but of course I'm a homeschooler. So I do have a lot of homeschooling friends and people who follow along. And so for homeschooling, a lot of the tips that I share for home life or routine, I do talk or share some things about our homeschooling routine or quiet time routine. So those are all kinds of things that help homeschooling people who find me or follow me. And I do a lot of like friend one-on-one help too. You know, a recent, especially during the pandemic, I had a lot of friends and people reach out to me to be like, where do I start with homeschooling? And you know, the first thing that I do is like breathe and like, you know, start simple because it's really overwhelming, right? Like, you know, or just even being home and managing a home can be super overwhelming. You know, everything what you talked about today, it can be so overwhelming. So yeah, that's a bit about that.
But I think
one thing.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay.
I was just gonna say that you're really good at nuggets. Like you know, a lot of times the things you're sharing on social media is just one little takeaway, right? And we just need that so badly, rather than, you know, sort of being bombarded with information. Just one little thing that you can do today to make life simpler, right? So
yeah, like the donation box by our door, like little things. A lot of little things over a long period of time really lead to big changes, right?
Exactly. What were you going to say, Elizabeth?
Well, I was just thinking, when I hear, you know, simplify your life, I think of getting like purging things, right? And one thing that's always been a struggle for me is, as I think most couples have gone through periods of financial strain, followed by periods of financial security. But those periods of financial strain kind of hang on almost like PTSD. And so when I think to start purging stuff, I think, well, what if I need it? You know, can I afford to buy this again? You know, because it's kind of expensive, but it's taking up space. What if I never need it again? Can you speak to that at all?
I can, yes.
Great thought. Yeah, what you mean, yeah.
Yeah, that is definitely a common thing that a lot of people struggle with for sure. I'm just thinking of my own journey, like when I went through all our stuff, it was when I first started it, I did like a big declutter of our home. Like, just like, you know, the things that were easier in some ways, like the junior high letters and like, you know, bigger things like that. Like you're talking about like finances and stuff. That was kind of something that we looked at over time to look at, are we using this? Do we need this? Is it easily replaceable? And most of the time it was yes. And like, even the things that we've gotten rid of that we ended up needing in the future, it ended up finding our way back to us, or somebody gave us to it for free, or we found it at a thrift store, or we have a community where we live where I'll post in the community group and be like, hey, does anybody have, this was the other day, my dad and my husband were expanding our driveway with paver stones, and they needed a tamper to tamper down the paver stones. And I was like, hey, anybody have a tamper? And there were two people who offered their tamper. So it's just like a different way of looking at it. So I don't know if I completely answered that, but it's definitely, it's like a process. You don't have to get rid of that if you're not ready to get rid of it. There's no rules for decluttering.
Sure.
There's so many different ways to go about it. Like you can read tons of different books with different methods, but you really have to do what works for you. And for me personally, I like the slow and steady, and just like slow and steady and thinking about it. But in the beginning, I did get rid of a lot of stuff, but it was more like surface stuff that I was like, I just need to get these extra toys out and these letters out and these clothes we don't need. Oh. So that was like quick stuff. But then all the other things like kitchen gadgets and appliances and like the bigger stuff, that was more of like the slow process of thinking about it. And that worked for us, but some people don't work that way. So it's just, you got to do what works for you, kind of.
I always think the comparison between sort of I've made this before, Fly Lady and Marie Kondo, like there's two very different methods. They're both really valuable, but depending on your season that you're in, and you know, depending on your personality type and all that, you know, a combination of the two or whatever. And now we have Kelly's course. We'll run it again. Let us know, because I'd love to let our listeners know about that when it's happening again. That would be great. So one of the things I always like, and you're good at takeaway, is okay, what would your top 3 tips be for moms wanting to get started? They're overwhelmed, they're sitting there, they're having that moment that you had, that I had, that, you know, is like, I'm drowning. You know, what are the top 3 tips you would say to get started?
Good question. So everyone starts in different places. And that's like one thing that I often share. You know, there's no like rules. It's not like you have to do this first and you have to do this first. And everyone's going to start in different places. But I think a really good place to start is really like what we've been talking about, the values and priorities, because everything kind of flows from what matters most. And I know you have a book on that too, Bonnie, that I've read. Love it. But really, right, like looking at that and then everything kind of flows from that, that is a great place to start. And it's not, and it's, yeah, that's different than just decluttering your home, but it just, I didn't really, I kind of started there. I kind of like went slowly through everything at the same time. But for somebody who's just like, okay, tell me where to start, that's a great place to start. And the second thing that I would share is that's helpful for a lot of people is just start in one area. So if you're talking more about, start in one area. It could be something from routines, like making bedtime routines simpler, or it could be decluttering, like declutter your pantry, one shelf, or I have a friend who's like one drawer at a time. So one area at a time. And I think it was your podcast, Bonnie, or your podcast on talking about like spiritual life with your children, and you're talking about just like adding one little habit at a time, like kind of
right
over time, and I love that. So like, yes, so the second thing is focus on one area at a time. If that works for you, it might not, right? So, but that's a lot of people like doing that. And I do that for maintenance decluttering, just one area at a time, instead of like, oh my gosh, the house is a disaster, I have to do everything right now. And the third thing for getting started is to find some accountability, whether that's through reading a book or finding like an Instagram community, which is what I've done too, is that I found people who live similarly as me, like minimal, simple living, and I love them all so much. And it's just so wonderful to go on and be like, oh my gosh, these are my people, and to learn from them and with them, because it's so hard. As you know, it's so hard to do life alone in any area of our life, spiritual or decluttering or, homeschooling. Like, we need community. We are meant for community. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because just before COVID actually happened, I had some moms that we meet monthly, just at a coffee shop in the evening, and just a group of local moms, and I usually do some sort of short talk, and then we have discussion. And they asked if I would sort of host a kind of getting your house in order session, right? So for, I think it was over 4 weeks or 5 weeks, and we just broke down the whole thing. Like, it wasn't really work from me. I mean, I was sort of giving ideas, okay, let's work on this week, but it was just an accountability group, really. And I made some sort of lists of things they could look at and areas of their house that they could work on and whatever. But I mean, any of us could do that, is just throw it out there, hey, I am going to start simplifying my life, and this is what I want to start doing. Anyone want to join me, right? On your Facebook page or Instagram or whatever. And that's just kind of a bit of a motivator, and kind of exciting to share your successes and laugh about your failures, as long as you're willing to do that, right? So yeah, those are great tips. Thank you so much. Fantastic.
I just have one more question, and that is, would you recommend any resources for moms who don't know where to start, or who want to move forward from just wherever they are?
Yeah, there's so many books out there, so I had a hard time kind of like fine-tuning. So I actually asked my community on Instagram. The one for me, myself, clutter-wise, I really like Joshua Becker's take on things. The book is called Clutter Free with Kids, and that's by Joshua Becker. I just love his perspective on things. And now this is,
show notes, yeah.
oh yeah. And this is from my community. I've heard of this book, never read it, but they really suggested it. It's called Simplicity Parenting by Kim John Payne. And another one they suggested, which I also have to read. I have like a massive book list. I'm always reading, right? I'm like,
don't we all?
I know. Yeah. And the third one they really suggested is Simple Happy Parenting by Danae Barahona. I hope I said that correctly. So these
are all books, I gather.
Yeah, they're all 3 books. And homeschooling wise, because I know there's a lot of homeschoolers, there's 2 books. Teaching from Rest really was so, I think I started it probably the second year or the first year into homeschooling, and that was such great encouragement to me. And it's one of those books that you can go back to. So
I love that book.
And Homeschooling Simplified, What Matters Most. I did read it, and I remember messaging you, Bonnie, about how much I loved it. And I think that it just drove home what matters most, right? So those 2 books for homeschooling and simplifying your homeschool/home life were, yeah, so you've got the list of 3 and then the homeschooling specific ones.
Okay, fantastic. Well, you've given us tons of stuff to read and to think about, and I'm so grateful for what you're doing, because I think that we're all benefiting from it. And you know, like I just really enjoy being on your Instagram, because it's just so gratifying. It's just gratifying. It's beautiful and it's gratifying. So thank you for all that you do and for sharing your journey with us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
And for up and coming, if anybody wants to submit questions, either spin-offs of this episode, we'll have all of Kelly's contact information on our show notes, and you can get us, reach us via Instagram, message on Instagram, message on our Facebook group, Make Joy Normal, or Homeschool Moms Who Drink Wine, or mine personally, Bonnie Landry, Facebook. So God bless and have a great day, ladies.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Kelly. Bye.